bipartisan group of senators is teaming up to take another go at banning lawmakers from owning and trading individual stocks while in office. Democratic Senators Liz Warren, Raphael Warnock, and Republican Senators Josh Hawley and Lindsey Graham are putting together a coalition of other lawmakers in the chamber based largely on Warren's proposal from last year with Senator Steve Daines.
Stock trading among lawmakers has become a huge issue of concern, especially in the wake of economic downturn the country experienced during the pandemic. Unusual Whales reported on this issue, writing, "Despite 2022 being the worst market since 2008, both Democrats and Republicans beat the market. Many politicians individually beat the market, and many made unusual trades, resulting in huge gains. It is truly inexcusable. In all ways we tested, Congress beat the market. This is the worst market since 2008, and yet politicians returned better than many." How unusual. So, Amber, will this bipartisan effort pay off? Do you think this is going to go anywhere? We have something in the House as well. Now this in the Senate. What do you make of it?
I wish it would go somewhere. I'm not optimistic, to be frank. There's not really a huge appetite for this because, lo and behold, a lot of Congress people are not going to want to give up their cash cow, which is their somehow perfect ability to predict exactly how the market is going to react to news of the day and legislation. I mean, it's truly amazing. Earlier this week, my friend Julio Rosas was testifying in front of the House, and he was insulted at one point by Congressman Daniel Goldman. And he pointed out that Goldman is one of these Congress people who has this amazing ability to predict the market. He perfectly sold off PacWest Bancorp before a 50% drop. He got lucky again with Western Alliance Bank Corporation. I mean, the list on the Nancy Pelosi stock tracker Twitter account, which is pretty heavily followed, shows all of these various politicians just doing inhuman type things with the market. And at a certain point, it starts to become quite obvious that there's a little bit of informal insider trading going on, let's say.
Right. It comes from both directions. It's both something, conditions they cause so that the corporations they have stock in end up performing well by choosing maybe not to regulate, by choosing maybe not to pass minimum wage standards for all of these corporations. They can kind of game the system, but they also get information about what potentially is about to experience a downturn, which sectors and which industries are things not going to go so well in the future. Maybe we'll pull our money out of our investments in those sectors and put it into something else that we think could be doing well in the future based on information that they have access to that no one else does, on top of the decision-making power they have that can determine how financially successful these corporations are. And so it comes from both directions. So it's a no-brainer that they shouldn't be allowed to trade stocks, but still well over half of members of Congress do.
Exactly. And this was a huge problem that I think really came into the forefront during the pandemic because there were politicians who had tens of millions of dollars in these big pharmaceutical companies that were developing the vaccine through Operation Warp Speed and who were, of course, making tons of money from selling PPE. And there was a huge conflict of interest there with Congress and public health bureaucrats deciding the future of public health policy and pandemic policy while there was a huge financial interest at stake. And it's the same thing with big tech regulation. A lot of the people who want to have meetings with Facebook and Twitter to not regulate those companies or to not hold them liable with what they publish under Section 230 have tons of stock money in big tech companies. So there's just all of these conflicts of interest. Even if there's not insider trading going on, just the fact that they have a financial stake in the decisions that they're making for the American people is hugely problematic.
Right. Yeah, it shows up everywhere. When I think about the transition to renewable energy, I think as soon as they pass sweeping regulatory measures when it comes to where we get our energy from and shifting towards renewables, it'll be very easy for them to pull out from their investments in fossil fuels and then invest in things like wind and solar and do that before the market, we see the stock dip when it comes to fossil fuels and before we see the stock rise when it comes to renewable and green energy. They can literally make money off of the legislation they pass. That's one side of this. But then I also think about them making more money when working people they're supposed to represent make less. When our wages are low, profits are high, and returns to shareholders are high. If our elected officials are people who have investments in the companies that are keeping our wages low, literally when we make less, they make more. That is insane. That's a real thing in the United States. We love to pretend that the US economy is a free market that is somehow disconnected entirely from our government. It's absolutely not the case. And the more we allow that lie to be the dominant narrative, the more we ignore how much our politicians are profiting off of their position of power and really gaming the system.
Yeah, and I know crony capitalism was kind of a buzzword that ended up being sort of mocked during the Tea Party movement, but it is the reality that government has a big hand in deciding which corporations pass or fail, which ones get government subsidies and which ones don't, which ones are have their friends and family members on the board and which ones don't, which ones get big lobbyist meetings with Congress people and which ones don't. It's all a game of favor trading, and of course that is affecting the quality of product that's getting to the American people, the quality of jobs that American people are able to have in these corporations. And now corporations have become overtly politicized to the point where if you apparently hold the wrong political views, you can lose your job, or you have to sit through all of these trainings of left-wing drivel. I mean, it's really turned our marketplace into this hyper-politicized, government-connected cabal. The two things are basically not divorceable from one another.
Yeah, and I think also about the policy to raise interest rates, because we can talk about that increasing unemployment, meaning there's more competition in the labor market for jobs, workers are willing to take jobs for lower wages and less benefits and work more hours, etc. But also the consequence of raising interest rates means that people who wanted to start a small business or invest in a small business, now it's more expensive. Now they're less likely to do that. That is squashing competition in the market as well. That policy is really crushing small businesses across the country. And I think even from the perspective, if you're not a small business owner and you're just a consumer and you don't think about ever becoming a small business owner, do you want to go to every city in America and experience the same corporate chains at every single strip mall? Like, do you want corporations to have this much power? And so by members of Congress not taking more of a stand when it comes to monetary policy in the United States, which they absolutely would have the power to do, instead of kicking the ice cube under the fridge and letting it melt by letting the Federal Reserve just adjust interest rates higher and lower, which is not sufficient monetary policy. Instead, they need to really step in and do something. But if you have stock in the S&P 500 in America's biggest corporations, maybe you're not as likely to stand up for working people and small businesses as well.
Yeah, there's a huge trend of corporate interests somehow magically aligning with government officials, and they always are things that stamp on the little guy. I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was just talking about the fact that a lot of these Congress people had tens of millions of dollars in big pharmaceutical companies, but also they were aligned with the corporations which could bear the brunt of strict lockdowns while small businesses went out of business. I mean, yes, they had the PPE loans, but then people were denigrated for accepting those. There was apparently favor trading in regards to who actually was able to receive PPE loans. And also, if you're a small business owner, yes, okay, you get a PPE loan and you can pay your employees, but you're still not making a profit. How exactly are you going to live? So the whole system seemed gamed from the get-go to make sure that the Amazons and Walmarts and Googles of the world were able to survive this massive economic downturn and stalling of buying and selling, while small businesses and everyday Americans were basically decimated by this.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll see this pass in the Senate and the House, and members of Congress won't be allowed to trade stocks anymore. And then maybe we'll see a bunch of our unfavorable folks retiring, Nancy Pelosi and Feinstein and the like, who make a ton of money off of investing in stock. We've got more Rising for you after this.